I was well enough to go back to work, they offered me some pain pills, but I wasn't keen on taking them, and in operating machinery, I opted for a couple of strong Tylenols instead. One thing that Marcy totally misjudged was my bond with my work buddies. I spilled the beans to them about what had happened the night before. They had all sorts of ideas, some good, and some not so much. It was comforting to know that my friends would have my back if I needed them. We had an 8-hour shift ahead, and each of us had a lot of work to do. We had an 8-hour shift ahead of us, and each of us was determined to brainstorm ways to make things right. We took a break for dinner in the middle of our shift. Anyone got a plan? I asked. Glenn spoke first. I don't have a plan, but I have a cousin who works for the guy. He handles all the car detailing. Word is he can't stand the boss. If you need info on the business or anything else, he's your guy. He could come in handy. Glenn? Anybody else? Danny? I got a couple of Magnums you can borrow. They're not registered, so I'm sorry. Thanks, Barry, but this is a little much for me. All right, you don't want to hear my idea, Barry said. I asked. I was thinking we tie him to a tree with his legs spread and light a fire between them, like the old Indian style. Everyone thought Freddy's idea was great, but we all decided against it. Kyle was the only one who hadn't spoken up, so we waited for him to share while we ate lunch. Why are you all staring at me? Yeah, I have an idea, but it's a little out there. Let's not get into it. I remember hearing about this prison in Arizona that made all the bad guys wear pink jumpsuits. It was supposed to humiliate them. Something like that could still embarrass him. So you're saying we should put him in a pink jumpsuit, but wouldn't he just take it off? I thought if we could get to him, we could tie him up and spray paint him pink all over? And then spray paint him pink all over. That might work, but wouldn't he figure out who did it? We'd have to knock him out first, then leave him tied up until we found him. Or like pills, or maybe hit him over the head. What's your plan? Plan? I can get a taser. We sneak up on him and zap him. Sounds easier said than done. How do we get to him alone? And how do we get close without him knowing? I don't have all the solutions. I just thought it was an idea. The buzzer sounded, signaling another 4 hours on the machines. My quota was down for the night, so the other guys helped me out to even things out. Marcy was already in bed when I got home. At least she kept her promise not to bring the idiot into our house. The response was just a chorus of groans. No one had any fresh ideas, but they were all willing to back whatever I came up with. It felt good to have some supportive friends. Things were typical at home. When I arrived, it was going to be a short night for me, working the night shift. I was up earlier than usual. Todd and Terry were excited about a trip to Chuck E. Cheese. Marcy didn't seem to mind, especially when I mentioned we'd be out all day. Danny, I need you to take some vacation days the week after next. Tony's buddy Wall-E is visiting from Detroit, and we're taking a 3-night cruise to Cancun. Can you handle it? Or should we ask your folks? Wait, going on a cruise with 2 guys sounds sketchy even for you. Don't be rude, Danny. It's not like you, Wall. You will be sharing a room with Karen. They've been pals for years. Oh well, that changes everything, I said sarcastically. I don't care much for this. I didn't know what to do next. Most of the ideas the guys and I discussed were like childish pranks. It felt about as useful as leaving a flaming bag of dog poop on his doorstep. I needed real revenge by noon. I was up, the kids were at school, and I could hear Marcy moving around the house. After a quick shower and shave, I headed out the door. Morning. Husband. No kiss for your wife. Marcy stood by the kitchen sink, hand on her hip, smirking. I just walked out without a word. Her sarcastic comment didn't deserve a response. I needed lunch and some time alone. The rest of the afternoon was spent killing time trying to figure out what to do with Marcy's lover. Without putting myself to too much trouble, I had work tonight and needed to get ready. I decided to stop eating at home. It was the only time I got to spend with the boys. But I couldn't stand Marcy's cooking anymore. Before I knew it, it was time for work. Things were normal until dinner break. Danny, I have the taser in the car. I don't know if it will be useful, but at least you have it for self-protection. Kyle seemed pleased with himself. Don't forget to grab it before you go home. I started the day way too early to pass the time before Chuck E. Cheese opened. We went to Hobby Lobby nearby. The boys were old enough to handle the plastic models on the shelves. The end products were not impressive, but they had a blast exploring the model boxes. I wandered around amazed at the variety of items available for creative homemakers. If only Marcy had been into crafts, maybe she wouldn't have brought that hairy gorilla home. But it was too late now. My eyes lit up when I found rows of designer spray paint cans, including 6 beautiful pink cans. They didn't have as much paint as Lowe's or Home Depot, but they were pink, and that was all that mattered. Todd picked out a monster truck kit, and Terry picked out a plastic tugboat. By then Chuck E. Cheese's was open. The kids gobbled up 2 pizzas and spent about 4 hours there before they burned out. We grabbed some cheap bread and headed over to Pandora Park. The ducks gobbled it up in 10 minutes, but we stayed a couple more hours before heading over to my parents' house. Mom and Dad were happy to have us over for dinner that night. Todd and Terry spent most of the night glued to the TV, so I had the opportunity to take a nap so I could get some sleep. Todd and Terry spent the night glued to the TV, so I took the opportunity to fill Dad in on what was going on with Marcy. It dawned on me that I was sharing this situation with others before Marcy could. She was threatening to do the same thing I was already doing, which made her threat almost pointless. Dad assured me that they would take care of the boys no matter what. That was a relief. I didn't want the boys to get hurt by all of this. Around 9 o'clock, I called Marcy to tell her we'd be staying at my parents' house for the night. I got her answering machine. After a hearty breakfast at IH, we returned home to find Marcy still in bed. I immediately fired up the lawn mower and started mowing in the back near the bedrooms. Todd and Terry were eager to work on their models, despite the beautiful weather outside, so I let them. I decided to devote the day to yard work. Progress was slower than usual because I found myself stopping to chat with the neighbors. Although I had hedge clippers, I bored a pair from Mike Fielding across the street. His wife, Mary, was known as one of the biggest gossips in the neighborhood. I told Mike that there might be unfamiliar cars parked near the house because Marcy would have some male children. Marcy would have some male friends over. Everything should be fine unless they get too loud or rowdy. If that happens, just call the police. It was hard for me to manage things since I was working nights. Larry Finley served on the board of the local church. I borrowed a spark plug wrench from him and apologized for Marcy's recent erratic behavior. Of course, he wanted to know what I meant. Larry was even more of a gossip than Mary Fielding, and within 10 minutes, he had enough gossip to last a month. I skipped lunch and finished work around 4 p.m. After a quick shower, I treated myself to a meal at Rosie's Cantina, choosing the most expensive item on the menu. My wife had this grand plan. She thought she could control me by threatening to expose me as pathetic if I didn't accept and support her cheating. She would make my life a living hell. It was a clever idea, but it had many holes. Within a week I had already spilled the beans to everyone. The next afternoon I stopped by the house to change for work, and there was Marcy, seething with rage. "What the hell did you tell the neighbors?" "Karen said you were spreading rumors that I was running a brothel here at night." "Come on, Marcy, that's nonsense. I just mentioned to them that you might have malevolent visitors while I'm at work, and they shouldn't make a fuss about it." Well, that's not how it's being passed around. Who else have you been gossiping with? I told everyone that I thought it would be better if they heard it from me first. Don't say anything to your parents or sisters, though you might want to talk to them before they come around. You might want to talk to them before they get wind of it. Damn, Danny, you're making me look like a __. Well, fair is fair. You are going to make me look like a fool. Sorry, honey, but I got to get to work. I got to hang out with the boys a little bit before I head out. The hardest part was not getting the quality time I wanted with them. Glenn had some good news. Continental Classics closed at 9 o'clock on Thursday so Tony could do the payroll. On Thursday so Tony could do payroll in peace. Even the cleaners were gone. Kyle showed me how to use the taser. No volunteers for the test, even though the plan was coming together. If I got caught, and I probably would, I would be facing jail time. I didn't give a damn. Tony DeMarco needed to be embarrassed. If I got arrested, I would make sure the whole story hit the papers and TV. Any publicity like that would either ruin him or piss him off enough to do something stupid. For me, the next few days, I only went home to sleep, shower, and change. I hadn't eaten there since that first day. Finally, Thursday came. I arranged to have my truck's battery die so Kyle could pick me up. The floor supervisor didn't bother the brake guys much. As long as we made our quotas and kept the quality up, they left us alone. What helped me was the OSHA rules for the job with the apron, gloves, and welding goggles. We all looked pretty much the same at 8 o'clock. 30, I slipped out the back. The guys would take turns covering my station. One spot would be empty, but no one really minded. The bathroom breaks were normal, and not being watched. The key was to make it look like I never left. I entered through the employee door at Continental Classics and went straight to the bathroom around 9 o'clock. Someone did a quick check before turning off the lights. 10 minutes later, I put on latex gloves and stepped out of the bathroom into a dim office area. His desk faced away from the door. He was concentrating on an old adding machine with paper tape. It seemed easier than I thought. With him preoccupied, he didn't hear me coming. I used the taser right on Tony's back, and I did it again, fearing he would turn around. This time he twitched a little and then relaxed perfectly. I secured 2 plastic cable wraps to each limb and found an old tie to use as a blindfold. He was surprisingly cooperative. I wheeled his chair to the glass window overlooking the showroom. He would be on full display. When his staff arrived in the morning, the pink paint did not stick as well as I had hoped. It soaked into his clothes quickly. It took several coats to get the effect I wanted. I barely had enough paint to get the effect I wanted, but I got the job done. He looked quite fetching in pink. When I was done, I carefully packed everything away. I thought Tony would wake up during my little decorating session, but he didn't stir. I planned to remove the tie and blindfold before I left, but he still hadn't woken up. Even though I was on schedule, I wanted him awake before I left. After 5 minutes of waiting, I started to get anxious. I tried to feel for a pulse, but couldn't find one. Maybe the latex gloves were blocking it. I took one off and tried again, but still no pulse. I even tried to find a pulse on his neck like they do on TV, but had no luck. When I took the blindfold off and touched his eye with the tip of a pencil, he didn't react at all. It was alarming. I felt panicked. I put the latex glove back on and wiped off anything I might have touched. I kept the necktie in my pocket and cut off the plastic straps to remove the red stains from the pink paint that made him look like a pink raccoon with white skin underneath. After making sure I hadn't missed anything, I went back to work. On the way, I threw everything, including the tie, in a storm drain. 10 minutes later, I was back at my station making brake shoes. No one seemed to notice I was gone. When the shift ended, I told the guys what happened. They didn't seem concerned. Freddie was impressed. Kyle drove me home and we both remembered the time he dropped me off. I didn't get my usual amount of sleep. Around 10 o'clock, Marcy burst into my room. "What did you do, you little jerk?" I just turned around and looked at her confused. "What are you talking about? Tony's dead," Karen called and said they found him in his office this morning. "I think you had something to do with it, and you're going to pay for it." That was the second time she called me an idiot in 5 minutes. It was clear I wasn't going to get any more sleep. I got out of bed, used the bathroom, and then took a long shower and shaved slowly. I even put on some aftershave, just to annoy my lovely wife. I didn't even make it to the coffee pot. There was a tall black man in the living room talking to Marcy. He had short hair and was wearing a dark suit. Marcy had called the cops, no doubt. I shook my head and went into the kitchen to make my first cup of coffee for the day. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Detective Darnell Green with an E. I'm here about Anthony DeMarco's death last night. Your wife mentioned a disagreement between you two last week. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" "Sure, but not here." "What do you have in mind?" "Let's talk in your office, not at my place." "All right." I noticed Marcy's frown, probably because she thought she was part of it. "Your car or mine?" "Mr. Mercer, I've got some errands to run, so I'll meet you there." "Any particular office?" "Second floor, room 206. Take a right off the elevator. See you soon." Marcy was boiling as I slipped on my shoes. I dumped the unfinished coffee in the sink, then shot her a grin on my way out. "Looks like you're getting what you wanted." "Honey, what are you talking about?" "What's going on, Danny?" 10 minutes later, I was sitting with Detective Green on the second floor of the City Hall. For the next hour, Detective Green asked all the necessary questions, and I answered accordingly. He touched on the affair delicately, without dwelling on it or making a big deal out of it. I admitted I had a reason to be upset, but clarified that I hadn't acted on it. It was a serious situation, but I tried to stay friendly, without being snarky. I think he appreciated that I cooperated even though I couldn't provide much insight. The most surprising part was learning that Tony had died of a heart problem. He'd had a pacemaker installed a few years back, which apparently didn't mix well with the taser, as they could tell by the marks on his neck. I felt conflicted about Tony's death, partly sad and partly relieved. Detective Green reminded me not to leave town, and we parted on good terms, and I felt that Green was on my side, which was reassuring. After grabbing a quick bite, I caught up on the TV news. They were covering the death of a local businessman, noting that he had no known relatives in the area. I withdrew all the money from our bank accounts and treated myself to a nice breakfast. When I got home, Marcy wasn't there. It took me about 30 minutes to move my stuff back to the master bedroom and hers to the guest room. The guest room was pretty cramped with just a small closet and dresser. I piled her things on the bed and left it to her to sort through. I checked the phone recorder in the basement, but there was nothing of note. I gathered all our financial and insurance documents along with other important papers. Luckily, Marcy's Volvo was in my name, which made it easier. I had to go to the police and have them look at the Volvo I was driving. I stashed everything in a folder under the front seat of my truck and called work to take 2 weeks off. A few hours later, Marcy came home. She seemed surprised to find me there. It was time to straighten things out. I grinned and headed for the guest room. "What all this? Who do you think you are?" she replied with a grin. "Talk to me. What's going on, Marcy? From now on, I'll be in the master bedroom. You get the guest room. Better start putting away your clothes. Anything left out till dinner time will be thrown out." "Got it. I can't fit all my stuff in there." "What do you mean, tossed?" "If it doesn't fit, you don't need it." "This won't work, Danny. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. You're in trouble." You better start getting organized. Any more questions? Ask me later, bastard. The third time today she's called me. She must be onto something. While Marcy was occupied in the guest room, I dumped her purse on the kitchen table and took my time sorting through it. Cash from her wallet, I left everything else behind. Next, I retrieved her car title from the pickup truck and drove her Volvo across town to a friend's car lot. I sold it to him for a decent price with the understanding that he would sell it wholesale out of town. Even after paying off the I pocketed a few thousand. As I was on my way to Taco Bell for lunch, my cell phone rang. You idiot, where's my phone? And Marcy's angry voice came through the house phone. It was a good test. I could check the recorder when I got home. Sorry, honey. I needed cash for a lawyer to defend me against the murder charges. I'll get you another one. I'll get you another car as soon as I get out of jail. I hung up and turned off the cell phone. After this conversation, I realized that hiring a lawyer was a must regardless of the outcome. I wasn't going to stay married, but that would have to wait. It was my turn to order. Todd and Terry were home when I returned. I went straight to my sons and completely ignored Marcy, although I couldn't help but notice her displeasure. The boys were excited to show me the models they had built. As Marcy began to prepare dinner, I strolled down the hall to the guest room. I chuckled to myself but decided not to argue. She was stubborn and determined right now. Marcy called the boys to wash up for dinner, and I went to the guest room to unpack my stuff again, as much as I wanted to throw it all out. Her stuff, it felt too immature tonight. I treated myself to Red Lobster. Money wasn't a concern, since I still had cash left over after paying the divorce lawyer's deposit. The shrimp and lobster combo was delicious, but those cheese rolls were still my favorite after I finished my meal. I turned my cell phone back on, hoping for a call from work or Detective Green, but instead it was my wife, Danny. How am I supposed to go grocery shopping? We need milk and a few other things. I'll take you when I get home. Let's try to do our shopping on Saturdays when I'm off work. I'd feel better if you did it. Oh, I got another call coming in. I got to go. We'll talk when I get home. Cobb called next. Detective Green interviewed the entire crew, both individually and as a group. Everyone's stories matched up. There was no way I could have missed work. He kept a close eye on everyone and could vouch for me being there all night. I knew I wasn't that smooth. If some investigator wanted to prove I killed Tony DeMarco, they probably could. It seemed like no one really cared. I made it home just in time for bed. Marcy was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. I grabbed a cold beer from the fridge and settled into my recliner. The TV was off, so I thought it might be a good time for Marcy and I to talk. So Marcy, how's the plan to make me look like a pushover and a loser going? That ended the conversation before it even started. Marcy finished her wine, got up and went to her bedroom. I thought she wanted to talk. Guess I was wrong. I took my beer and went to check the recorder. The first call was to her sister. No secrets there. It seemed Marge knew all about the affair with Tony and was fully aware of it. The next call was to Marcy's mom, and that was a little different. Mom had no idea what was going on. Her daughter convinced her that Tony was just a friend of Karen's, and that I was jealous because I'd been trying to hook up with Karen for years. Tony gave me a lecture about it, and I got upset. She didn't say outright that I killed him, but she definitely implied it. She tried calling the cell phone company to replace the phone I took but had no luck. Next, she called the DMV to report her missing driver's license. They advised her to report it to the police. Then she contacted the bank to request a replacement credit card, but they informed her the account was closed. I have to give her credit. She kept herself busy. The last message on the machine was to Karen. Even though Karen lived nearby, they used the phone instead of meeting up. The boys and I were up bright and early the next day, we left the house before Marcy woke up and returned after lunch. Marcy insisted that I drive her to the grocery store since she no longer had a car or a driver's license. That evening, while she was cooking dinner, I checked the recorder. Wally had arrived, and he immediately called Marcy. Their conversation was quite fascinating. He believed it all Marcy told him, and promised revenge. Wally and Tony were childhood friends, and he was not going to let this go. He gave Marcy his contact details and told her to call him the next day. Marcy then excitedly called Karen and expressed her happiness. It was hard to believe this was the same woman I had been married to all these years. The change was sudden and complete. I didn't realize my actions were so serious. Aside from dealing with her lover, I grabbed a burger before going to bed. The lawn needed mowing again, so I had a good reason to stay away from Marcy. The next day around 11 a.m., Marcy's parents were coming to take the boys for a sleepover. I didn't know about it before, but I decided not to object. Tomorrow was a school day, and Grandma Wilcox assured me that they'd be back on time. I was eager to check the phone's recorder, but first I grabbed lunch, since I'd missed breakfast. After a quick shower, I headed to Denny's. Marcy didn't mention that I wasn't eating at home anymore. Marcy and Walt cooked up a plan to get me out of the house. He cooked up a plan to get back at me for Tony's death. It all seemed kind of silly, especially since I was in on it. After Marcy and I hit the hay, Walt would sneak in through the sliding door on the back deck. She assured him it would be unlocked. If all went according to plan, it would look like a burglary gone wrong. Both Marcy and Karen would call the police when they heard it. It might sound stupid, but then I remembered I hadn't changed the beneficiaries on my insurance policies as I left. I sarcastically blew my wife a kiss, and she blew me off. I had dinner with my folks and hung out there for the evening. Before I left, I borrowed Dad's shotgun. The short-barreled 20 gauge would be perfect for the occasion. Marcy was already in bed when I got home, her light on, probably reading. The only call on the recorder was from Karen boasting about her afternoon romp with Wall-E. She assured Marcy she would be ready for later that night. I didn't want to kill Wall-E, just slow him down, damn it. I didn't want to kill Tony either. I hoped Wall didn't have a weak heart like Tony's. I wanted to see if Mary left the back deck door unlocked, but I was afraid he might spot me, so I stripped down to my shorts and messed up the bed covers. I wished for a cup of coffee, but there was none, so I settled for a Coke, which I waited in. When I saw him on the deck, I dialed and reported an intruder. I made sure to say I felt my life was in danger and didn't hang up. The patio door slid open quietly, and there was Wall-E. I waited until he was inside, and then I fired the shotgun. I aimed low, so as not to kill him accidentally. The first shot knocked him back onto the deck. With the second, he fell over the side of the deck and broke the railing. I knew he was alive because he was howling. The rock salt must have hurt like hell. The shotgun was louder than I expected. Inside the house, my ears were ringing like crazy. I turned on the lights, and in an instant Marcy was in the house. I went to check on Wall-E and found a Magnum with a silencer on the floor. Marcy kept screaming, so I pointed it at her, and she stopped and ran off. Looks like Wall-E broke his ankle falling. Some guys are lucky. 10 minutes later, the first police car pulled up. I put the shotgun on the floor to make it clear. I gestured to the phone, and one of the officers told the 911 operator that everything was okay. They asked if anyone else was home, so I mentioned Marcy in the bedroom. They brought her out, but it turned out to be a mix-up. She kept talking non-stop, and despite our best efforts to calm her down, she kept screaming, "Stop!" And despite our best efforts to calm her down, it didn't work. Eventually, a large female officer escorted her outside. I noticed Karen and some other neighbors outside. I smiled at her and made a throat-cutting gesture. She hurried away without smiling back. The ambulance arrived for Wall-E. When Detective Green showed up, he grinned when he saw me, and I couldn't resist grinning back. It wasn't meant to be cheeky, I just couldn't help it. The officer took Marcy back inside so she could get dressed. She was a little calmer once dressed. We all headed to the police station. I asked for separate cars, so Detective Green let me ride with him. We didn't chat on the way downtown, but he glanced over and smiled again. When Green let me go, it was already daylight. Despite our brief chat of about 30 minutes, they kept me there all night, and I felt like I was in Guantanamo with all the coffee. They made me drink. A police car drove me home, though I was a little disappointed not to find the house cordoned off with yellow tape. It looked like nothing had happened, not even a crack in the sliding glass door from the rock salt. I guess W took the brunt of it. I estimated that it would take about an hour to fix the broken railing, so I collapsed into bed and didn't wake up until after lunch. After relieving myself, I stumbled into the kitchen to find Detective Green sipping coffee and reading the paper. He must have made the coffee while I was asleep, since I'd had my fill the night before. I'm not sure how he got in here. You're quite the cool cat, Mr. Mercer, he remarked without looking up from the paper. Not knowing how to respond, I remained silent, not sure if he was joking. He finished his coffee. Detective Green, I need a shower, a shave, and some food. I'll take care of it, unless it violates some police protocol. Take your time, Danny. I'm in no hurry, he replied as I headed for the shower, wondering when I would be able to get out of here. I headed for the shower and wondered when he'd find time to rest. Lunch consisted of 2 hefty pulled pork sandwiches, and Green even joined me for a beer. We sat in silence for a while, and it started to feel heavier, itching to ask me something. Aren't you, Mr. Mercer, kind of funny? I was thinking the same thing about you. The detective signaled the waiter for 2 more drafts. I spent all night throwing questions at you now. I've been throwing questions your way all night. Now it's your turn. All right, first off, where's my wife? We still have her. Charges will be filed this afternoon. I finished my beer. Your wife's folks got her a lawyer. I wasn't expecting that. I had a ton more questions now, but the more I asked, the more I risked letting on. I decided it was best to ease up. It was good to know that Marcy's family was there for her. I'm out of questions, Detective Green, but if you've got something to get off your chest, feel free to spill the beans anytime. He took a big gulp of beer and chuckled, not too loud, but definitely a laugh. Here's another thing. You didn't catch any of the conversations between your wife and Mr. Williams, did you? Or maybe record them, you mean, Wall? You're right, that earned me a little chuckle. If I had a recording like that, would you want it? I ain't sure yet. If things go the way I think they will, it won't matter. But if one of them gets a sharp lawyer, it might come in handy. If I had a tape, wouldn't it get me in hot water? You're on to something there. Just trying to make my job a little easier. I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can do without a tape. I'll see what I can do without a tape that may or may not exist. I gave a little nod of thanks. Danny boy, reckon I should take you home. Your boys will be back from school soon. They need their dad. We got home just as Todd and Terry got off the school bus. They came over, and I introduced them to my new detective buddy. They wanted to see his badge. Everything seemed fine until Green leaned over and asked, so who built the tugboat? And asked, who made the tugboat? And who made the monster truck? I made the truck, Todd exclaimed proudly, puffing out his chest. I made the tugboat. Want me to show it to you? Terry said just as proudly. Maybe I'll check it out next time. Got to run now, Green said, as he left, grinning like he knew something he knew about the pink paint. I felt trapped with nothing I could do that night. We ordered pizza. The boys didn't ask about their mom. After dinner, Marcy's dad called and asked for help bailing her out of jail. I politely declined. He may not have fully understood the situation, but at least he was trying to help. I asked where she was staying. He hesitated, then said she was staying with them. We packed up Marcy's stuff and dropped it off. Easy enough. When we got back, I saw a U-Haul at Conn's. It was gone the next morning. Marcy never contacted me. I had to check the paper every day to stay in the loop. It felt like I was being deliberately kept out of the loop. No one bothered to clue me. And there was no trial. Marcy pinned everything on Wall while he said it was her idea. They both ended up pleading guilty. Marcy got years for conspiracy to commit murder, and Wall got years for attempted murder. Detective Green never mentioned the tape again. He didn't need it. Karen disappeared without a trace. Dad was happy to have his shotgun back, joking that I could borrow it again if I needed it. I served Marcy with divorce papers when her sentence started, and she didn't fight it. It seemed like she didn't want anything to do with me since we hadn't been together. I sold the house and moved back in with my parents because I couldn't work and take care of the boys on my own. My coworkers welcomed me back, and although they offered me a change to the day shift, I refused. I took the boys to visit their mother at my women's prison every month. I waited in the car while they visited, usually less than an hour. Sometimes they met outside when the weather was nice, and I watched them from a distance. I didn't ask about their visits, and I asked them not to tell anyone. I asked them not to tell me about their visits, and I asked them not to tell me anything. It seemed to work out well for all of us. Everything was going smoothly until I got the phone call. Hello, is this Daniel Mercer? Yes, I'm Angela Hawkins. Detective Darnell Green suggested I contact you. There are some things we need to discuss. I know, Detective Green, but why do you want to talk to me? Tony DeMarco was my brother. Oh no. Just when I thought I was done with all this mess, something like this pops up. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't help you. I ended the call before she could say anything. 2 days later, she called again. Daniel, I'd really appreciate it if you could meet with me. There are things I need to say. Detective Green mentioned you're reasonable. Where would you like to meet? I'd prefer the auto showroom, but anywhere you're comfortable is fine. It took me a while to figure out what to say. I'll meet you Saturday morning at 10. I didn't know what she was up to, but I felt safer in a public place with the boys. I wasn't using them as a shield, but I thought she'd be less likely to try anything if they were there. I didn't know what kind of grudge this woman might have. If she was Tony's sister, she must be Italian. If she was Italian, she might be fiery. I figured I was overthinking it and needed a beer. I called Detective Green to ask what was going on. He laughed and said to meet her and stay calm. Easy for him to say. He didn't kill her brother. Continental Classics was a big place next to the main showroom. They had 2 big buildings in the back for cars that needed work. I was surprised to see they were having a grand opening. When we arrived, I didn't expect there to be a lot of stuff. I didn't understand. Terry and Todd were torn between the cars and the free stuff. The first thing that hit us was the smell of popcorn. A guy in clown suit was handing out bags of popcorn, 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 bags of popcorn. There was a soda machine and another clown with a hot dog cart. The boys wouldn't be needing lunch today. It wasn't hard to spot Angela Hawkins. I recognized her right away as she walked purposefully towards me. She had all the Italian features: dark hair, dark eyes, olive skin, and a curvy figure. Tony was tall, but Angela was short and stocky. As she approached, I felt a little nervous, especially when I saw her daughter beside her. The girl was about 10 years old, looked just like her mother, but with lighter hair and no curves. It seemed we both used our children as a kind of shield. She reached out her hand in a friendly gesture. Daniel Mercer, right? It felt natural to shake her hand. I've always wanted to say that, like in the Dr. Livingston movie," she said with a smile, though she seemed a little uncomfortable. Which put me at ease. Since I was quiet, she kept talking. "This is my daughter Carla." Carla greeted us with a smile. Todd said his name, while Terry eagerly shook her hand. "Carla, why don't you show the boys around?" Terry followed Carla to the showroom, and Todd headed for the hot dog stand. It seemed like a positive start. "We can chat down here, or head up to my office. Your call." "I think the office would work." Those were my immediate words. As we headed for the stairs leading up, I noticed some employees glancing our way, chatting with each other. The clerks sporting blue bowling shirts for the opening stood out, but instead of focusing on the customers, they seemed more interested in me. At the far end, one guy flashed a big smile and a thumbs up. I didn't answer, shaking my head to indicate he hadn't. "I won't bore you with my life story, but you should know a little. Tony was my brother, my only family, and when he died without a will, I inherited his business." It was good to hear that someone had benefited from the ordeal. As she spoke, I noticed her pierced ears and wedding ring. A small silver cross hung from her neck, though I was more distracted by her cleavage. Just as I began to refocus, she interrupted. "Mr. Mercer, are you with me?" It was a playful question. Her smile confirmed it. "Sorry, I got distracted. I was just admiring your crucifix," I said, reminding myself to keep eye contact. She playfully punched my arm. "Want a beer? Sounds good." There was a small fridge next to the desk, and she had to bend over to get the drinks. One moment I was staring at her cleavage. The next I was face to face with a nice bum. A beautiful bottom. She wasn't just explaining things. It felt like she was trying to charm me. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but it was definitely working. She opened the can and handed it to me, making sure not to bend over too much. We both took a few sips without saying a word. "Well, Angela, I'm glad things worked out for you. But I'm not sure why I'm here. I should get back to the boys before they get worried. Better if you call me Angela. Can I call you Danny?" "Sure. So are we done here?" "No, not yet. Just sit tight until I'm done. Detective Green said you'd get it." I kept quiet, figuring the sooner I got it over with, the sooner she'd wrap up. "Tony was a jerk. He was rotten and got what he deserved." Odd as it sounds, I wanted to thank you. It felt like a setup. Was this detective setting me up? Was the room bugged, or was it her? She could easily have a bug hidden in her bra. Damn, I caught myself staring at her cleavage again. "Are you wired or recording this?" "Of course not. Why would I do that?" "Would I do that?" I finished my beer, still unsure. Maybe I should check on the boys. Don't want them getting into any mischief, or just stay put. She sounded pretty firm about it. I never had much love for Tony. About 3 years ago my husband died in an accident. He had no life insurance, and the guy who hit him was uninsured too. I had no job skills and a daughter to raise. Tony was my only family, so I reached out for help. He chipped in for some of the funeral expenses, but that was it. He wouldn't even return my calls. "So you're saying that his death was a blessing for you?" "Yeah. And it seems like it was for you too. Maybe we should both count our blessings and leave it at that." "You don't want to talk about this anymore, huh?" Angela grinned and finished her beer. "I need a favor from you. You're the only one who can help me." "What can I do for you?" "I want you to join my team as my general manager." "What do you need me for?" Angela seemed a little nervous. She looked at her feet, then at the walls, as if searching for the right words. "Did you notice how my employees looked at you when you came into the office with me?" "Yeah, they didn't seem very friendly. They all think you're the one who killed Tony. And not only that, you made a joke out of it. They used to fear Tony, and now they're afraid of you." It's like they respect you out of fear. Do you understand? They don't respect you. No, they'll try to take advantage of me left and right, and I can't do a damn thing about it. I'm not tough or smart enough to keep them in line. What can I do? Mostly just be here. Eventually we'll both get the hang of this business and be able to control things. But until then I need you to intimidate them. I'm a nice guy. Angela, that's why Tony and my wife thought they could push me around. She seemed more at ease now, well, didn't she? She seemed more comfortable now. Well, it didn't work out too well for them, did it? For some reason, I found that funny, and let out a little laugh. For the next half hour Angela and I worked out the details. She had no problem offering me better pay and benefits than what I was getting at the factory. If things didn't work out, I could always go back, but to be honest, I didn't really want to go back. I wanted this new gig to work out. Todd didn't look too good when we went back downstairs, I guess from all the hot dogs and soda. From all the hot dogs and sodas. On the other hand, Terry was having a blast. He seemed more interested in chatting with Carla than checking out the cars, which was a positive sign. Todd ended up getting sick in the truck on the way home and skipped dinner. I started my new job that Monday, and things unfolded just as Angela said they would. I was surprised how quickly I got the hang of things around the place. I got friendly with some of the staff, and soon I had insiders to keep an eye on. It turned out that the guy in the blue shirt who gave me that big smile the first day was Glenn's cousin, and he became my biggest supporter. Most of the staff wanted the business to do well, and were more than happy to point out any troublemakers. Angela let me handle the firings, and I found that I kind of enjoyed it. I was really living up to my reputation. Detective Green came by for coffee a few times, but our conversations were casual and pleasant. 3 years ago, I was a cop down in Philly, came in one day to find my wife in bed with my boss. I gave him a beating on the spot and kicked my wife out. The department gave me the boots, so I landed a job here a week later. Before I left, I made sure the jerk who was with my wife got the boot too. I didn't press him for more information. It was his personal business. At least I understood why he seemed to be on my side. The boys promised not to spill the beans about my new job to their mom. I felt it was important for Marcy to see her sons, not so much for her sake as to rub some salt in the wound. Yeah, I know it's not the best way to involve your kids, but I got a twisted sense of satisfaction out of it. Angela and I spent more time together, both at work and off. One weekend, the boys insisted that I take them and Carla to Noble's Grove. Although we were staying closer to home, our living situations made any chance of romance difficult. I was definitely interested in getting closer to Angela, but it wasn't convenient. I was still living with my parents and the boys, while Angela and Carla were in a small studio apartment, and business was going better than expected. Danny, I think it's important for each of the boys to have their own room. It's better to sort that out now than deal with it later, don't you think? Of course, I realized it was a loaded question, and it dawned on me that Angela saw me as more than just an employee. The idea of a potential romance was becoming more promising. Yeah, I like that idea too, and I think a split bedroom plan would be smart. I don't want the boys too close to the master bedroom. Angela had a small smile on her face as I walked out. Our relationship was strange. Although we never had sex or even came close, I felt closer to her than I had to Marcy in 12 years. 2 days later, after my divorce from Marcy was finalized, we all went to Red Lobster to celebrate. The kids didn't know why we were celebrating, but Angela did later at the apartment while the kids were watching a pay-per-view movie. Angela kissed me In the kitchen we hugged and giggled a bit until Carla walked in. "Oops, sorry Mom," she said, then added with a smile, "It's about time." Back in the living room, Carla whispered something to Terry, and they both smiled. Angela and I behaved ourselves for the rest of the evening, but I was excited about what might happen next. The next day, while the kids were at school, Angela and I took a long lunch break and returned to the apartment. We both had a lot of pent-up energy to release. We didn't do it at all after that. We often had long lunches together, and Angela got serious about finding a place to live. Detective Green visited us regularly, usually for casual chats, but sometimes to admire the cars. He especially liked the Baker Hawk, once owned by Roger Ebert, the film critic. Angela gave him a good deal. "Danny, I need you to take me to see Marcy." I never quite understood what that meant. I knew the words, but the idea confused me. "Do you want me to come with you? Just drive me there. You don't have to be there." When I talked to her on a warm, sunny fall day, we arrived at MYY. The inmate visitation was outside, so I parked near the fence. 10 minutes later, Marcy and Angela came out into the exercise yard and sat at a table. They chatted and smiled like old friends, but after 5 minutes, Marcy's smile disappeared and was replaced by a scowl as she leaned across the table toward Angela, who remained cheerful. Suddenly Marcy lunged at her, but the guards quickly intervened and escorted Marcy back inside over her protests. We drove in silence for a while until Angela turned to me. I introduced myself, and she seemed happy to see me. Everything was fine until she realized I wasn't on her side. I may have misled her a little at first. "What's the deal?" I told her I came from Baltimore for payback. She liked that. She thought it was against you. "But really I just meant I was here for payback." But really I just meant I was taking over Tony's business to settle the score." Revenge can still happen against a dead guy, can't it? All right. But why did it upset her? She wanted details like when, where, and how. Obviously she meant you now. I was curious. I told her it had taken a really long time and asked if she wanted updates. She was all for it and demanded to know my exact plan. When I mentioned how she lost, she went totally nuts. It was priceless. All right. "So spill it. How do you plan to kill me?" I got to hear this. Her grin widened. I told her I was going to make you fall in love with me till the last. That's it. Yep, pretty funny, right? I thought she might get mad, but didn't expect her to flip out like that. We both laughed in silence. 2 months later, Angela and I tied the knot in a small backyard ceremony at our new place. Angela sent Marcy a wedding invitation with a little note inside. "Everything's going according to plan. He'll bite the dust in 40 or 50 years."